From the beautiful Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, this is the Dental Lighthouse podcast. We take questions from anyone in the dental profession and discuss what it takes to win not only in dentistry, but in life. Business, leadership, relationships, parenting, health and wellness, money management, nothing is off limits on the Dental Lighthouse podcast. I'm Jason Tanoory, your host, and have over 20 years of experience to pull from. Learn from my mistakes and let me help you collapse time so you can become the best version of yourself. Yo, welcome back. Dr. Jason here at Dental Lighthouse podcast, and I have a very, very special guest today. But before I introduce him, I just wanted to give a little bit of context for this episode. I had a one-on-one yesterday with one of my great doctors, and she asked a super simple yet complicated question on how we handle questions from our patient base about insurance. Specifically, in this particular example, she was talking about a bridge versus implant versus partial denture. And as she got done educating the patient, all the pros and cons, the first question out of the patient's mouth was, in fact, well, what will my insurance cover? And being that she's 2 or 3 years out of school, she hasn't had a lot of at-bats with these types of conversations. So I did my best to coach her up on verbiage, on scripting, and ways to navigate that question. But as I was driving home from that particular office, I thought to myself, who in this space could best help me, help my doctors, and more importantly, help listenership in terms of answering these questions and dealing with these nuances from either a patient in the chair or from a prospective patient on the other side of a new patient phone call. So I ended up choosing the one, the only Dental Nacho, Dr. Paul Goodman. Paul, welcome to the show, brother.
Thrilled to be here, Jason. So honored to be still connected with you, which is now 2 decades later when we were running around West Philadelphia, becoming dentists before Facebook. You want to know where the party was? You had to ask people face to face. You want to know where the test was face to face. So thrilled to be here. It was one of my favorite topics in dentistry. I think I actually believe this strongly. If you are a dentist or work in a dental office, this will be the number one question you get asked in your life, right? You know, what does my insurance cover? How does my insurance work? Whether you're totally fee for service or you're a network with what I call 47 spoiled guac PPOs, you got to be able to answer that question.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel that as dentists, there's a few things that we don't want to unpack. In my group of clients that I coach, one of the primary ones is leadership. When we start to talk about leadership and leadership development and keeping people accountable, I see eyes kind of glaze over and they want to run back to the operatory and look for MB2 on an upper molar root canal, right? They would try to abdicate that responsibility no matter what. And I feel like a secondary topic, probably in parallel with leadership and accountability, is how do we handle these insurance questions? You know, early in my career, it was when I got these questions asked to me by a patient, I would say, well, Mary at the front desk can answer that for you. And it's just such a cop out. And I'm not suggesting that you need to, as a provider, be able to unpack everything, but you should have enough confidence and wisdom to have a decent level of conversation with the patient, either in the chair or on the other side of the phone, to create some clarity around their question. So I'm excited to unpack this with you. And hopefully give our listeners some wisdom and some knowledge on, how to take this to the next level.
Love it. I'm totally with you. I mean, I believe that some of the stress that dentists face, Jason, is because if you signed up to be a firefighter and there was a fire one day and you want to run in the other direction, you would not be a very good firefighter, right? You signed up to deal with fighting fires. I don't think any dental students knew this, whether they were 2001 and 2 grads or this. That conflict is the fire we have to deal with. And they don't realize that we are going to face conflict in conversations so often, and it's uncomfortable to face it. And I believe that if you don't have the tools to face this, conflict fire, from cost to insurance to length of time to how long things last, that it can be a brutally draining dental career. And like you said, my dad said to me, Jason, when I wanted to drop out of dental school, I don't know if you ever knew that, he goes, one day dentistry will be the easy part. He goes, if you want to drop out of dental school and do something else, Paul, no problem. I support you. And he could never be more right, because I was on a podcast with Paul Etchinson yesterday, who's awesome. we know how to troubleshoot MB2 or a crown that doesn't fit or an implant impression coping that's off, but these are the things that are way more difficult to troubleshoot.
And arguably way more important. Now, I'm not certain, I'm not suggesting that you need to do mediocre clinical dentistry, but what I've always found is what separates good practices from great practices is the ability to communicate either with our team or with the patients and just having a high level of emotional intelligence. So, wanting to have these conversations and wanting to, or having enough wisdom to have these conversations intelligently, in my opinion, does truly separate, let's say, average from above average or from great. And I truly believe that. And I think the other thing that we need to unpack here, at least from my perspective, and please, Paul, share your thoughts, is insurance participation. It's not good. It's not bad. It is what it is, right? So, and I think the two of us come from very different perspectives. And I think that will ultimately help our listeners in the sense that my organization is a little bit on the larger side. We're a heavily PPO participating office. Now, we have some guidelines that dictate if we're going to participate with a specific PPO or not. Without getting into the weeds, we typically look at what the average adjustment is going to be from our fee-for-service fees. And if it's under a certain range, then we'll participate with them. If it's over a certain range, then we won't. And the reason that we do that is because we're trying to scale. We have 20 doctors in our group, and we just find that lowering the barrier of entry for patients on the phone makes sense for what we're trying to do. But there's practices like yours, Paul, or other people who are choosing the fee-for-service route or to truly minimize PPO participation, which is, again, awesome. But you're still going to have to answer these questions because at the end of the day, patients have this benefit no matter if you participate with it or not, and they're going to want to utilize it and they have questions about it.
And I will share, Jason, I love this, is that what's really easy is to have always been fee for service. What's really easy is to always have taken a lot of PPOs. What's difficult for my brother Jeff and I is we transformed, especially in 2022, from an office that participated with PPOs at a mild to moderate level to a fully out-of-network office. So we had a lot of patients that felt abandoned, felt upset, didn't understand, and I totally understand why they felt that way. So I'm uniquely positioned because I've been in both worlds, right? So my friend Todd Fleischman purchased a fee-for-service practice. He said, I get no credit for that. I get credit for keeping it going, but he's never had that challenge. And then we also see dentists without judgment that are in network with many PPOs and have no desire to become out of network, and they probably easy for them. But we're probably talking to some of these people maybe in the middle. And like you said, too, Todd Fleischman, who has his patients pay before service, Jason, they do not leave without paying. He's still navigating these questions, concerns from his patients as well.
Yeah, no question. No question. So, let's start from the top. And I guess what I mean by that is a patient that's not in our office, a prospective patient that's going to call your office, Paul, or going to call my office. And oftentimes I don't feel like the patient even knows what to ask for. So it's been my belief that their default question is, do you accept my dental insurance? When the reality is, because they have no idea what they should even be asking for, that's the default question. Do you agree with that? And if that's in fact the case, how are you coaching up your people that answer the phone to navigate that question?
So I give two different types of answer. One, we have talking points. I believe that, you're putting in a veneer, Jason, you got to read the instructions, right? What if the patient sees you? You're reading the instructions? Yep. I don't think silane's a thing, right? So we read instructions for step by step with clinical dentistry to get results. My mission is words should be the same way, the exact same way. So when someone says, hey, Pennington Dental, do you take my insurance? My team is trained to say, that's a great question. A lot of people ask us that. The way it works is our transitional phrase. The way dental insurance works is it's not really insurance like medical insurance. It works more like a coupon. At this dental practice, we will do the best job possible to maximize the benefit of your coupon. That's just the first 5 or 6 sentences to create a framework around the conversation. The other thing I'll share with you, authentically, you're into vulnerability. I am a person who would go to an out-of-network medical doctor because my family has dealt with so many medical challenges, Jason, that I wouldn't want my medical doctor to assume that I would not participate in their care if it didn't take my insurance, even if it was a 5-figure copay. So the other part is you need to find out how important insurance is to that person. And you have to ask it in a way that's like 6-year-oldy, right? Hey, patient, we can check into your benefits before you come into our practice to get a sense of what you are going to pay out of pocket for your first visit. Or other patients come and schedule their first visit and they think of their insurance like a coupon or rebate. Which one would be the best route for you? And if you pause, they're just going to literally tell you the answer to that test you want. I don't know what you think of that sort of start to it, but that's how we train our team to talk about it.
No, I love that. Unpacking what you just said, with your first point, you're basically validating the patient. Like, that's not a stupid question. That's a very legitimate question. And then the second point, as you probably realize, but in case some of our listeners don't, it's classic Cialdini principles of social proof. So you're basically telling the caller, we have many, many people ask this question. And whenever you tell someone that they're behaving in a way that many other people also behave, like they feel this sense of, oh, cool, like I didn't screw this up. So I think right off the bat with the validation and the social proof, you're definitely creating an environment, or you're creating a level of communication that is going to be ultimately advantageous for you. Let's just unpack that last point that you made. So, you've acknowledged the question, you validated that it's the right question and that a lot of people are asking it. Can you just go a little bit deeper on, as your person that's answering the phone is trying to ultimately understand the value system of this prospective patient, can you just repeat specifically how you're trying to determine that?
Well, I'm always trying to create, clarity around conversations about cost with care. I want to see it. So whether it's on the phone, someone who's known us for 20 years, I want to be compassionate. I want to be clear. So let's just say the first visit is $400 for an example. We just say, the first visit here for what you're asking for is a $400 visit. Some people come and pay for that because they don't have insurance. Sometimes I try to make them feel a little lucky, right? Some people come and just pay $400. People just like you is my magical 3 words for everything. People just like you come to our office and they pay the $400 and wait for a check from their insurance. This check could be $50, could be $100, could be $150, just general things. Or, which we totally get, you might want to have a more precise knowledge of what you're expected to pay. So we will look into that for you with a complimentary benefits check. Because I don't want I have enough friction in my life. I don't want someone to come for a visit and then yell later, right? I'm not judging other practitioners, but I don't say, yes, we take every insurance and then deal with it later. I think some of that can be misleading, right? Misleading to the patient. I'm not saying they're trying to trick them. So I'm just trying to have my team develop a relationship as fast as possible and then make the patient, I wrote it for my notes here, don't guess what's in someone's head. Just ask them, right? I mean, maybe, Jason, you haven't had your teeth cleaned in 3 years and you're just like, oh, $400, great, I'll come and do that, right? Not saying ours is exactly $400. Or maybe someone's a family of 6, right? And now you're talking over $2,000 and you want more awareness. So we train our team to be calm, compassionate, always willing to look into stuff for people, we're checking that for you. And then my team, if we can have my office manager one day, my sense is most people actually move forward without having their benefits checked. But if they want to, that's okay too.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're basically giving the patient the autonomy to make a decision, right? So when you paint them into a corner and there's only one choice, I feel like, and this is true in my perspective with treatment planning to what we're talking about right now, right? We're basically giving them a choice. You're more than welcome to come in and prepay, or we can, qualify your benefits and give you more specificity on what your out of pocket's going to be. I just love that idea. Let's just go take a step back real quick. And while your front desk is having this conversation with the patient, at any time, are your administrative team asking the patient like what specifically they are looking for from a clinical perspective? Because let's say the $400 number, I think, is a good number. So let's say that most of us have fee for service fees for X-ray, 4 bite wings, comprehensive exam. Let's say it's $400, right? But what if the patient is looking for a cosmetic consultation, or what if they have a broken tooth that they're trying to get in for? At any point during this screening, let's call it, is your team trained to ask that question before they throw out a dollar amount?
Well, so I like this. So one is we have the problem focused visit, which people do have to pay for this. It's not $400, it's less. So if they're getting clues like my tooth just broke, I got one problem, they immediately go into, we can have you in soon. We'll deal with just this one thing. The cost to find out, just like bringing your car in.
Right.
Why do dentists have to give all the answers? I got to take my car in, Jason, and they're sending me videos of my car, asking me if I want to spend more money on my car, right? I think it's a great system. Like I bring my car in, I go get coffee. The guy's sending me a video later saying, you want to do X, Y, or Z. I think they're awesome. I don't know why people are always knocking the car industry. I think they're great, right? But my point is, if it's problem focused, they hear the pain, the broken tooth, they start to just go right into this problem focused visit is going to be $200. People pay ahead of time. That one's pretty narrow, right? We just don't get into, you're going to pay $100, the insurance pays $100. That's worked out well. And then I have done this one thing. I only do one thing for free in my office. I do it for my sanity. So Jeff is my brother. We have a surgical prosthodontist. We have a periodontist. We get to do some fairly large cases. And those cases, relationships are important. So we do a complimentary panoramic x-ray and talk about your teeth visit. So if someone says, all my teeth are going to fall out, I need dentures, and it's clearly going to be beyond the hygiene visit or the problem focus, we say, you know what we do? Come in, we'll talk about it. We'll take one of these no charge x-rays and you'll get some information. So that is like the easy button for my team. And I'm okay with that. Sometimes they show, sometimes they don't show. They've turned into all on 4 cases. So those are kind of the 3 routes in our office: hygiene world, problem focused, or large case complimentary consult.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I think you have more clarity with which of those 3 choices, which of those 3 levers you're ultimately going to pull if you're developing a relationship with a patient, if you're trying to ask the right questions, if you're actively listening and you hear cues that the patient is mentioning, and then you can ultimately put them in one of those 3 buckets. I really think that's a great way to do it.
Jason, I am proud of all the skills I've developed with communication, but I've taken tons of training on this, coaching, all this stuff. Like one of my original coaches in 2010, people don't argue with their own decisions. So at the next mastermind, Jason, if I go, we're going to get up at 6 a.m. and we're going to climb a mountain, you might be like, I'm not in a mountain climbing mode. I say, we're going to get up at 6 a.m. and do a HIIT class. You go, I want to climb a mountain. I say, Jason, I know you love working out. Would you like to do a HIIT class or climb a mountain? Which one sounds best to you? I become your hero, right? You get to decide. I've created the boundaries. And people really like when people do that to them, even though it seems like a 6-year-old trick. When you say to your 6-year-old, you have M&M, this could happen for Halloween. You can have M&Ms or Snickers, Drew. You can't have both. You just win these conversations. Not winning. You just navigate these conversations with more success.
Yeah, no question. No question. So I feel like that gave me and our listeners a lot of good tools to deal with the prospective new patient phone call, the prospective new patient that we think is insurance driven, when the reality is, like we talked about, they truly just don't know what question to ask. And we can put together some type of resource for the listeners on how I train my team on this. And if you're open to sharing some of the things that you use to train your team, we can put it together in a packet and make it available for our listeners.
Because it was a pain thing. So we went out of network in 2022 with our biggest insurance, and they send your patients a letter saying your dentist now hates you, kind of, I'm paraphrasing. So we had people coming in, Jason, with the letter, really upset because they had seen us for years. They kind of made it seem like they couldn't see us anymore. I don't think it was the most ethical letter to send. I mean, was it legal? Yes. And so now I have to, the front desk is like, Paul, we got people crying and yelling. So I made a 7-minute video, and it's been called in office manager groups, Office Manager Gold. And I said to my team, this are the talking points. Why did we go out of network? We do not want your insurance to have a seat at the table when making the best decisions about your teeth. Is it really important to go on network? We'd offer, Jason, to refer them to dentists down the street who we trusted. Oh, I totally get it. You got 6 kids. If I was in your situation and we clearly have seen we couldn't convert them, I just got a text this morning from a DSNer. How many patients did you lose when you dropped your last insurance? Want to know my answer to that? No idea. I don't think anyone knows this answer. I think they are
Yeah.
impossible steps. So I have a whole 7-minute video, glad to share with you if it would help your audience. Cause it was like, I was like, my team, I felt bad for them. Like they were getting a lot of heat. I didn't know they sent those letters before we told them. It was quite a bit of chaos in our office when that happened.
Yeah, I love your thought of questionable ethics, and you, to your point, it was probably legal to send that letter, but man, talk about throwing people under the bus. Like
Yeah.
when I see letters like that, it just blows my mind.
For years, like it's kind of messed up. Like I understand they can be clear, but it made it seem like these 72-year-old who'd seen us for 20 years literally couldn't come to our office anymore. Like it was illegal. And we had to really, like, use your term, unpack a lot of emotions. You could still come. We're here. So those things caused me to create this little training video that has been really helpful to a lot of offices.
And to the point we made a few minutes ago, and again, I'm not trying to paint with a super broad brush here, but it's been my experience that most dentists will abdicate this level of training and this responsibility. They don't want to create a 7-minute video that's going to help their administrative team kind of navigate these problems. They would rather look for MB2 and an upper molar and just kind of hope and pray that their team knows the right verbiage and how to navigate these issues. And, hope's not a strategy, right? We've heard a lot of people say that. So I think you have to ultimately be proactive and say, okay, if we're doing this, or if we're going to try to get better at that, me as the founder, CEO, owner, whatever title you have to ultimately take on that responsibility of training up your team to deal with these issues. And if you don't have the skill set, then go get it, right? Or go put your team in front of people that can help them navigate these issues. But by just putting your head in the sand and pretending it's not an issue and it'll ultimately go away, it doesn't end well for anybody.
It's also unfair to your team. Who wants to have the most annoying job? You want a line of people who are annoyed with you waiting at your front desk to explain why you don't take spoiled guac PPO anymore? That's not fair to your team. Set them up for success. I mean, it's like, and you were talking about someone who, these things happen in your operatory with existing patients. So someone used my video once and the patient went from upset that they wouldn't get everything covered to saying yes to the treatment plan because they just simply reframed how it worked.
So let's talk about that now, right? So in my mind, when coming into this conversation, leveraging your wisdom, I was hoping to get some context on how you deal with the prospective new patient. And let's say there's a patient in your chair. Let's say it's been an existing patient 3-4 years. And like the example that I mentioned earlier, that I had a one-on-one with my doctor, missing a couple teeth, and the treatment plan is ultimately implant dentistry, fixed bridge work, or partial denture, right? So yeah, they're trying to unpack these 3 choices. And like I mentioned earlier, the patient's first question is, what will my insurance cover, right? So do you feel like we should have done things differently from the patient education perspective to avoid that question? Or do you feel like that question is inevitable, and how do we ultimately navigate and respond to that question?
I mean, I love this topic the most because everybody likes a deal. The DSNers like a deal on Job Connect. They come with their 25% off DSN discount code. You got people with 10-figure practices. They like, I want my 25. So what I'm sharing is be normal, right? I'd be like, sometimes I like a deal. Like everybody likes a deal, right? So if you just make things a little more fun and friendly, when you're face-to-face that patient, first, I always go over all options, Job Connect, Nacho sponsorship, dentistry, without discussing costs. People cannot beat me. So if a company says, what's it cost? What's it cost? I said, if you would just give me a few minutes to explain all the benefits, I promise I will get to the cost second. But one of the things I'll share is don't say, this will age us, Jason, but don't say an implant's $3,000, a bridge is $2,000, and a partial's $1,000. At one time in dentistry, those were the prices. You set it up front, you've lost the patient. So I review those options. And then I say, talk about the total cost. And I say, the good news is, since you are lucky enough to have dental insurance, it's going to contribute to this cost. And then I usually do, at this point in my career, bring in my patient care coordinator. But back in the old days, it was just me. I would do everything. So I'd say, the good news is, this $4,000 cost, $3,500 is going to be for you. $500 is going to be paid by your insurance. Some people don't have this, so you should feel lucky that you have it. I believe those words. And then I just let it sit. I mean, we've been dentists for a long time. One time, a successful attorney, when I was 30, Jason, needed an apico on a front tooth, infected front tooth. Okay. He goes, how do you expect me to pay for this? I'm redoing my kitchen right now. And I'm just like, I don't know what you want me to say back to that. And then I had a blue with 10 cats, right? It's a specific decision. You got 8 cats. And you're like, not enough cats. I love my patients, but I'm an observer. And we've said that you could do removable implant snap and overdentures for 25 grand. I said, cool, I'll bring a check next week. I'd love to get that 5% pay in full. I don't judge anybody. I just say, here's what's happening. Let it sit. They want to go home and talk to their spouses. That's fine. I think we're such problem solvers. I think maybe I can add this value to your audience. You can solve with an extraction in 30 minutes. You can solve with a filling in 30 minutes. Some of these financially complex things, they might have to think about it. Just let them think about it. I would too. If you said to me in the next 5 minutes, I spent $15,000 for dental nachos, can I do it? Yes. Would I have to think about it? Also, yes.
Yeah, 100%. So I just love everything that you said there. Let's just unpack it a little bit. First and foremost, and I think I originally learned this from John Coy's 20 years ago, after going through his curriculum, is always managing the expectation before it happens, right? So in the situation that you just described, being proactive about telling the patient, I promise you we'll talk about money. I promise you we'll talk about total costs, and we'll talk about payment options, and we'll talk about insurance. Because if you don't have that one statement before you get into your patient education and go over the 2 to 3 options, I can assure you that in the back of their mind, they're wondering about that, right? So just get ahead of it, get it off the table, be like, Mrs. Jones, there's a lot going on here. And I promise you, once we go over all of your options, we will have a very detailed conversation about insurance, payment plans, if that's important to you. So I love that idea. My question for you, though, is based on what we just talked about, is are you asking any specific questions of the patient in order to either narrow down or take specific things off the menu? Like, for example, what I train my doctors based on the situation that we just talked about, replacing a couple teeth, right? Are you going to be okay with teeth that come in and out? And if a patient's like, hell no, then that gives me or my doctors permission to not even offer that as a treatment option. Do you coach up your, and I know it's you and your brother, but just based on your experience.
We have these early experiences in life and dentistry that imprint us. I have this sense that I'm obligated to give a general awareness of what's possible. But like Lincoln Harris talks about and other people, you can't confuse the patient. They'll tune out completely. So I do things like this, Jason. Hey, this is an unexpected expense, but let's talk about a year. If you had a year to invest in chewing and smiling with confidence, what kind of budget might you have for that? And here's the things I know immediately. When they go, I have no idea, that means I haven't thought about it at all, which is okay. Or they say, you know what? I've been thinking about this. I got 15 grand. And then that does help me narrow down from, we do a lot of not a lot of implants, but, staying all the time teeth for an arch could be 35 grand. Snapping and out teeth could be 20 grand. A conventional denture, I always say dentures without implants are for smiling, not chewing well. You can use that one. It's 100% true. Dentists get mad at me. What's wrong with dentists, Jason? They go, not all dentures stink. I go, yeah, but most do, right? Can we live our life in the most? And can you just authentically tell people? I say, hey, your denture's going to make you look great when you're at your family reunion. Everyone's going to go, you have great teeth. But when you go to the after party and there's chicken parm sandwiches, you're not going to be able to eat them well. Do you want to eat those chicken parm sandwiches? So my point with this kind of mini rant is I do narrow down my focus, but I do kind of have this general awareness. Maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I've had people do smaller cases and come back to do larger cases. So I give general awareness of everything, but then narrow down into what kind of makes the most sense.
Yeah, I love it. You just reminded me of one of our mutual mentors, Dr. Goel, where he would say, he was in our cross program at Penn, and he would always say to me, Jason, when you're talking about dentures with patients, you need to communicate to them, dentures are not a replacement for teeth. They're a replacement for no teeth. It's just such an interesting perspective, because I think we as dentists, especially as a young dentist, like we do fail to communicate the expectation. Well, I can make you a partial denture. I can make you a traditional denture. And the patient's like, yeah, you're giving me back my teeth. Perfect. But why am I all of a sudden not able to chew? Well, that's because I failed to manage your expectations from the get-go.
I mean, what's one of the things we have a surgical prosthetist, an amazing guy, like a superhero. We talk a lot. You go get a hip replaced and they're like, you sit in a chair, right? People get their teeth replaced and they want to literally do the version of sprinting right out of the operatory. And it's our fault. We just got to explain, when you get your hip replaced, there's a rehab time. It's a big deal. We want to get you back to that chilling, but it's going to be a process because we deal with frustrated patients who, even when we explain this to them, just don't grasp and I think more dentists should do this. We're too good. We make things look too easy. We don't talk about the challenges enough. I can talk about it all the time. I say to people, we're magicians. You should be lucky that you're here. You should be lucky to live in this time. Dentistry is magic. We give you bionic shark teeth.
The hip replacement analogy is such a good one. And it's probably close to 100 times I've taken out 30 teeth on a patient, given them upper and lower immediate dentures, and seen them like 3 days later for a sore spot check or a follow-up, and them like yelling at me that they can't function like they did 20 years ago. And I'm like, okay, who mismanaged this expectation here? More often than not, it was me, right? So I'm going to use that hip analogy and coach my doctors to use it too, because it makes absolutely so much sense. And from a patient's perspective, I suspect that they would get that.
And I believe, Jason, as someone who's been doing this for 20 years and loves thinking about people, it's because I think eating is people's favorite thing to do. It's very emotional. And if you told me I had to sit on the couch, I don't mean dramatic and say I can't walk, but if you said I have to sit on the couch and order takeout food, I go, that sounds relaxing, right? If you told me I could walk around all day, but I couldn't eat the foods that I want, it would really bother me. So I understand why the patients think this, but it's our job to manage their expectations. It's our job to build a fence around it. That's from Patrick Winston, How to Speak. One of my favorite speaking videos, 17 million YouTube views. Your listeners should check it out. How to Speak by Patrick Winston. I mean, we just need to do this reinforcing to them. You're not going to be able to eat right away. I tell them to go what to buy. I mean, I know this stuff from dental school, but like, I don't have these, you probably like them, those Fairlife protein shakes or whatever. Like, you got to buy these things. You got to set yourself up for success. I mean, when people get a hip replacement, Jason, they set up their whole house beforehand, right? They're on the first floor. So I know I kind of went on a diatribe, but that just is hopefully helpful in the patient communication process. Because I've been there too, where people get frustrated 2 days later.
So I would love to hear, and I know my listeners would, how you and your brother Jeff, who have tons of experience and wisdom in this space. So let's go back to this fictitious example. Patient's missing a couple teeth. You tell them ahead of time, we're going to have a very detailed conversation. Here are your three choices: implant dentistry, a fixed traditional bridge, or a removable partial denture. And they ultimately want to know what their insurance is going to cover. Do you have, does that like spark you to ask specific questions? Like, you've referenced insurance a couple times. Is money a big obstacle for you? Or something along those lines? Because in my world, based on my experience, if someone's going to continually come back to cost, insurance, which is fine, right? It just depends on their value system. I would then like to say to the patient, look, I can tell that money is a driving factor for you. If you want the least expensive option we have, it's this, right? And I'd be more than happy to do this for you. But I really got to be clear with you that I've done this for a lot of patients. And more often than not, they're unhappy, they're unsatisfied. If we're talking about a partial denture or a traditional denture, I'll use some anecdote like it ends up in a jewelry box, and the patient's miserable. Like, are you using any type of communication like that?
Oh yeah, this is one of my favorite ones. So patients will sometimes have this block, and they want the cheapest thing, even if you've explained to them that the cheapest thing is not going to get them the results that they want. So I'm just going to use a similar one, but let's say you have a tooth that's questionable, questionable prognosis, which I call like not a good chance of working out. We're dramatic. Why do we call it the terminal dentition? Could we be more negative? Dentition, Jason, it's terminal, right? Why are we so negative? But what I'll share in these situations is I say things like this, it's like, I'm like, hey, if we do this thing, that's the least cost, and we're back here a year from now, and you want to upgrade to the next level, will you be happy you got a year out of it, or will you be frustrated you spent that money? And then I stop talking. And
that's gold. That's so gold, Paul.
And because I make them, I make them own their treatment plan. What do you want to call it? Like, we have a nice yellow form. It's only about cost. I believe cost is confusing. So we have a colored form that's only about cost, and we get them to commit to something. And people don't like no-shows, right? We're at our DSI thing. I know we can't tell, these are not secrets, but a big thing was cancellations, right? It's a tale as old as time. If you could solve cancellations, you'll be the richest person on earth. I'm not joking. If you could solve it. Because why do people cancel? They're not committed to the care. They're confused. So I do everything. I'd rather someone not schedule than cancel. I mean, how many of us have had a big case that we're excited to do, not just because of the money, but because of the thing, and day before they say, my cat's sick for the 15th time, right? And
right.
So we work really hard to get this commitment. And then I just say, hey, if we're sitting here 12 months from now and we have to upgrade, or you want to upgrade, we'd be glad you got 12 months out of it. And then I just, even though for someone who's so talkative and fast talker, when I'm with patients, it's calm. I stop talking. I let them think about it, and I think, it makes dentistry more enjoyable because it's the John Coyce thing. I love him. You're developing your raving fans, or you're just developing people who aren't ready for it. And that's okay too.
Yeah. I use the phrase play chicken. When I'm trying to coach up my treatment coordinators, even my doctors, it's like, say what you need to say and then be comfortable in the silence. And then by that, I'm saying play chicken with the patient. And typically the first person that talks ends up losing. And I see it all the time with young TCs and with young docs. They'll say everything that they need to say. They'll use the exact language that you and I have used. And then 4 or 5 seconds will go by, and then they'll speak up again because they're just so uncomfortable with silence.
No one teaches us this.
I agree.
This is more important than your clinical skills. And why is it more important? Because if you don't master this, you don't get to practice your clinical skills. So more important, both important. More important, because if you don't do this first part right, you do not get to practice your clinical skills.
Just yesterday, most of our practices now have at least 2 doctors in them. And yesterday I was on a one-on-one with one of my doctors, and she sent me photographs of this upper premolar MOD amalgam and the palatal cusp completely broken off, right? So the treatment plan, the patient actually came in like a month or so ago, saw one of the other doctors, and the treatment plan was removal, implant, screw retain crown, which is what my treatment plan would be now after doing this for over 20 years. The other doctor in the office, their treatment plan was endo build-up crown. Probably not as predictable, but I could tell that they made that treatment plan because they were getting steered by the patient, right? The patient was financially driven. What's going to be least expensive? What's my insurance going to cost? Blah, blah, blah. I feel like so much of that situation occurs every day across the country, but can be navigated by the wisdom that you just dropped, where you ultimately say, this is not going to last very long. You might get a year or 2 out of it. Let me know if you're going to be happy or pissed off at me if in 2 years you come back with this thing failing, and you're either glad that you got at least 2 years out of it for what you paid, or you're upset. Because if you're going to be upset, then we should just do the right thing now. If you'll be happy in 2 years based on doing a root canal build-up crown, sweet, let's do root canal build-up crown. Yeah. I just feel like it just gives all of the I don't want to say all the responsibility to the patient, because we do have a responsibility to only make treatment recommendations that we are comfortable with. But I love the idea of just managing that conversation the way that you described.
I appreciate it. Here's my Nacho wisdom. No one remembers the joy of saving money when they're annoyed it didn't work out so well. And that goes for us. When you buy, I heard on a podcast, how many times do you want to buy the cheaper Post-its? Because you're like, and then they fall off the wall. And no one's like, I'm glad I brought the cheaper Post-its, right? And no one remembers the joy of saving money when they're annoyed it didn't work out well. And I've learned this other thing. I love to do more podcasts on these. Like, someone had taught this to me early in my social media world. Like, if you do an online course for $3,000 and then you raise it to $4,000, you're not the same people that would buy it for $3,000 will buy it for $4,000. So a lot of things in dentistry, these savings are not, yes, all on 4 versus a denture. Yes. Right. But a lot of the things like your nice associate was talking about, that was inside of them. Because if you put the screw retained implant crown and then the maintaining of the tooth, it probably wasn't dramatically different. I know it sounds different. I know insurance pays different, but maybe that would help them, because I think that it's more of inside of them than with the patient when those things happen.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah. And I think as you grow older in your clinical practice, you start to realize these things, where I think it's truly a blind spot for let's say dentists that are out less than 5 years. Like they're at that point, and I fall into this category too. My primary goal was to appease the patient and just say, I hate rejection. I don't want you to say no. I don't want you to go to the dentist down the street. So what do I need to do? You know, I almost sound like a game show host. What do I need to do to get you in this car? Like, what do I need to do to get you to say yes and leave me a 5-star Google review? Even though the reality is I could have been agreeing to things that I knew deep down were not in the best interest of the patient long term.
Because you're avoiding that conflict fire. You got to get in there. We're conflict firefighters. Yeah. I mean, all day long, conflict. If you can put on your helmet and put out that conflict. And and I think I say this in the most supportive way as someone who, you know, is glad they became a dentist, but also could have been other things. If you don't master this in the way that fits for you, it's a long career. And it doesn't matter if you make a lot of money. It doesn't matter if you own your own practice. If you cannot master these conflict-laden conversations that we have, it's just so emotionally draining.
100%. It just, from my perspective, it could lead to tons of burnout and just a lack of joy and fulfillment in this profession. It's an amazing profession if you can go into the storm and handle some of these things on a regular basis. And like I'm always saying to my coaching clients, like, do it one time. It's going to be uncomfortable, like playing the piano for the first time. Like, where the hell are my fingers supposed to go? But the more you do it, the more it becomes easier. And the more you start to realize, like, we need to have this level of conflict resolution if we're going to get to where we want to go. And by just me putting my head in the sand and avoiding it, it just causes chaos for everybody. So 100% on board with what you're saying.
Love it, Jason. I would just share one thing is that I say this to my family. I say this to my friends. I try to remember it. Sometimes people are just really mad at the situation. They're not mad at you. And you can't take it personally. If someone walked into your life and said you had to spend $5,000 on something you don't want to spend money on, they're mad at the situation. They might not be mad at you. If I could tell new dentists what I wish I did more of, I took some of that stuff way too personally. Now it's like, whatever, the Taylor Swift, brush it off, right? I'm 20 years in, but people can get mad at situations when they're not mad at you as a person. And you must make that distinction, or like you said, burnout and suffering can occur.
No doubt. All right, let's wrap this up, Paul. I really appreciate, your wisdom and your lived experiences and bringing them to me so I can help my docs and bring them to listeners or anything like that. This next question the answer is obvious because you're everywhere. But if people want to learn more about you and what you're all about, what are the best ways for them to get exposed to your philosophies and your content and stuff like that?
Well, I don't want anyone to fall off the treadmill writing down this number when they listen to all your podcasts, Jason. So I just simply share with everyone all the things I love doing from Facebook and Instagram and text message. People can use dentalnachos.com or dentistjobconnect.com. We work really hard on both those websites. They can get to me. They can get to my team. There's free resources. I was telling you, I wrote a recent book on patient communication that you can use at your morning huddle. So, dentalnachos.com, dentistjobconnect.com is great. And I just love doing these things. I'm honored you asked me to be part of it.
Oh, I'm going to start reading that book this weekend. I'm not suggesting that you do this for everybody, but I was lucky enough to have you gift it to me. And I didn't even know that you did that because I haven't been at my flagship office in a couple of days. But for the people that are not watching this YouTube version, can you just say the name of the title and where to get it?
So my favorite movie and place in the world is Philadelphia. In that movie, Denzel Washington said, explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old. So I took every letter and I said, you could use this word instead of a different word. And I asked my team to go over one word at the morning huddle. So it's supposed to be fun and 6-year-old-y, but it's just a great way to get everyone aligned on what to say, how to manage conflict. They can also it's on Amazon, the ABCs of patient communication, but we have a pop-up on dentalnachos.com. I priced it at the plate as a cost of a plate of nachos, Jason, $15. So if you can get a plate of nachos, you can also afford to make your words better. So thanks for letting me share that.
No worries, brother. Thank you so much for the time, Paul. We'll have to do it again soon.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you. That wraps up another episode of the Dental Lighthouse podcast. You have a choice today. Choose to be a lighthouse. Lighthouses are powerful and steadfast. They are beacons of light for others to reference when life gets turbulent. Go out into the world today and become a lighthouse for someone. Give more than you get. True joy comes from serving others. Start today. I'm Jason Tanoory, your host. Thank you for listening to the Dental Lighthouse podcast. For more information, podcast show notes, or links to anything that we have discussed today, please check out our website, thedentallighthouse.com. We would love to hear from you. If you would like to get on the show, please email us at podcast@thedentallighthouse.com.